Hello everybody and welcome to the Cyclical Investors Club YouTube channel. This video is going to be an update on Pfizer stock. I made two videos on this one in the past, just in the past couple months. We're in December now, and the first one came out in early October when I first relaunched the channel. And I analyzed Pfizer. I shared kind of the price that I thought I'd be willing to buy it at, which was around $30 per share at the time. And then right after that, then within like 2 weeks, they announced that this year's earnings were going to be much worse than expected, like half or something what was expected. And so I put out an update video over that weekend where I lowered my buy price for Pfizer down to a little bit above $26 per share. Based on that announcement and them being weaker than I had been expected. Now, Pfizer has hit that buy price. I think it was $26.21, if I remember correctly. And right now it's $26.66 as of yesterday's close, because they made another announcement that I think next year was going to be weaker than expected. And I bought some shares yesterday, so because it hit the buy price, and so I thought I'd make a video update on what's going on with that. So let's see. Yeah, so I want to say $26.21 was where my old buy price was, and the stock fell to $25.76, which was below that, and so that triggered a buy, and so I bought about a 1% portfolio weighted position. I think for the strategies that I use, a 1% or a 2% portfolio weighted position would be the highest that I would go. But 1 or 2% for a stock like Pfizer is about right, I think. So I'm going to I'm change things up a little bit to make them a little bit more simpler. There were so many factors to consider in the last two videos, between the COVID decline, the COVID boost, the vaccine sales plummeting, sort of people not liking Pfizer generally anymore, and combining that with the recession risk. So looking back at kind of what they did during the Great Recession, there was a lot to also, whether you use adjusted earnings or basic earnings, which look quite a bit different, and there's just a lot to try to take into account when you're trying to actually put some numbers on it. But I do think that this is actually a little bit simpler than it appears in some ways, but I still always try to put numbers to it because I'm not a story person, really. It's easy for stories to make you ignore the numbers. So there always needs to be like at least some way for me to think about the numbers working that are realistic. So what I've decided to do with Pfizer is to simplify things a little bit. I'll show you what I'm doing here. And this is different than my last couple videos, but the buy kind of range is right in the same spot. So I looked at basic earnings before COVID at $2.77 per share. And Pfizer had been growing earnings about 5.22% per share before COVID. So basically what I did was I took this point, I extrapolated out that pre-COVID growth to see, where would they be if we just pretended COVID never happened. And when I did that, I got $3.40 per share for this year. And if you add up like what they did end up earning, and especially if you use the adjusted earnings, compared to what you get if you extrapolate out the previous trend a little bit farther, even though this is all spiky and everything, and even though this year things kind of fell off a cliff, if you just added up the cumulative earnings during this time period, it's about the same as it would have been as if COVID hadn't happened. By the time you take these two declines and these two huge years together, you put it all together, and they earned about the same amount of money as you would have expected them to earn before. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So what I did was I took that $3.40 for this year, which is obviously much lower than what they're actually earning. And I said, okay, let's say it takes them 2 years before they finally get back up to normal. That would be like normal. And then normally I look forward 10 years and project earnings 10 years from when I do things. But since it's going to take a couple years to recover, I just projected theirs out 8 years instead of 10. So on the short term, you can actually do this with fast graphs. But you can only go a couple years. So let's look at what their PE was. So I think the pre-recession PE was about 13 here, it looks like. Maybe at the peak, closer to 14, right? 1474 there during that peak, kind of going in. So that gives you kind of a, actually, let's do forecasting. So if we look at this PE here, what this does on fast graphs is it will take where the stock price is and it will say, okay, because they expect earnings to recover pretty similarly to what I am projecting. They expect earnings to get up to 309. So I'm saying 340. So it's pretty ballpark same. If it just trades at a 14 PE just from those earnings alone, you're looking at a 68% return in 2 years, which is 33% per year. Now, I don't know what the timing on this recovery is going to look like. For me, I think this is more of like a 5-year bet. And really what you're betting is there's kind of 2 stages of the bet. One is that earnings just kind of go back to normal. Now, leading up to here, really they had steady earnings that were growing just a little bit. There wasn't anything like spectacular about it. I don't know, maybe let's shrink this. Let's shrink it and we'll just see what the basic number looked like. So about 4% earnings growth through the Great Recession and all that. Not great. So I estimated about 5% earnings growth up before COVID, probably from somewhere in here. I don't remember exactly where I picked, but so I'm figuring like 5% earnings growth. So when I do that and I run the numbers on that for 8 years, I get a buy price of $29.70. If I do it for 7 years instead of 8, which would be more conservative, this drops down a little bit below $26, about where the stock bottomed on this. Well, I don't know if it's actually bottomed yet, but bottomed yesterday. So this range of like $26 to $30 per share is kind of where everything is roughly pointing to. So I mean, I think that's kind of the long-term thing, and that would give you like just a long-term rough estimate. That would give you like an 8 to 9% CAGR over, like an 8 or 10 year period, which is kind of what I'm looking for when I buy a stock. Now, we don't know what drug stocks are really hard. Although before COVID, I mean, Pfizer wasn't growing much, but they had very steady earnings. So I wouldn't expect this decline to just continue more than probably this year, maybe a little bit next year. I mean, if you're losing a bunch of money on your vaccines because you made too many, then the next year you're probably not going to make as many, and you'll probably be all right. So, and you probably cut some costs in between. So I think maybe if it doesn't happen next year, the year after that, I think in 2 years we probably see a significant recovery in earnings. So that's one thing. I think that's a pretty decent bet. To go along with that, while you wait, you get a 6% dividend yield. I think it's highly unlikely the dividend gets cut anytime soon. So you can sit around and wait and collect that dividend yield for things to normalize with the stock. And then, as a kicker with drug stocks, you have one bad part, which is patents expire and they can fall off hit a patent cliff and earnings can fall. So that can happen. But they can also discover new drugs. So basically, you're placing a bet that says, look, I'm probably not going to lose much if I just hold this for like 5 years. And there's a chance you could get a big winner at some point over that time. So that's really the simplest way I think to think about it. And that's really how I think about it, even though you can put the earnings together and make the math work. Um, the way I really think about it is I'm buying it cheap. It's probably not, I mean, who knows, it could fluctuate a lot. A lot of people hate Pfizer right now, which is great. I like it when nobody likes a stock and, all the news is kind of bad and grumpy about it. That's when I love to buy stocks. So for me, I'm taking a 1% position personally, and I'm just going to tuck it away and check back in 5 years, and we'll see how it does. So that's my Pfizer buy. This is only my second buy this quarter. I do have maybe one or two more coming before the end of the year, but I think now's the time to go ahead and take a shot, and the risk reward looks pretty good here. All right, if you found this useful at all, hit the subscribe button. I do have those 2 other videos on Pfizer if you want to go through my thinking before this, and kind of see what I was thinking, see why I didn't buy during this entire boom and bust. And now we're buying down when it's cheap. All right, see everybody later. Bye.